In the last 90 days, there's 160,000 IP addresses that are trading known child sexual abuse material, and only 893 are being worked in the United States right now.
Unfortunately, we're still in a position on a lot of policy that we have to wait for the crime to transpire before we can even do anything.
There are ways to combat not just trafficking, but exploitation, but we don't take those approaches. And part of it is because there's a profit aspect on the tech aspect.
Where do we need to go? What are the laws that we need to be seeing in place?
First of all, legislation's horrible. Our political system's horrible. Everyone is in their own silos, and when they get together, they talk, hey, yeah, that sounds like a great
Sounds
idea.
good, but no action comes of it.
You hit it right there. We talk about the same thing over and over again with the same result, which is insanity.
What are the things that you would want any community member listening to this to know? What are the things that you think are important?
Biggest thing is that
Welcome to the Team Protectors podcast. My name is Brittany Dunn. I am the COO and co-founder of the Safe House Project. Today I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Kristi Wells, the CEO and other co-founder of Safe House Project. Safe House Project is a national anti-trafficking organization combating human trafficking by training individuals to identify and respond to trafficking, equipping them to report suspected trafficking, helping victims escape their trafficking situation and access safe housing. We're here to equip communities to respond and be part of the movement to eradicate human trafficking. So today we are so excited to be joined by John Pizzuro, who has a phenomenal background in human trafficking investigations, in working with internet crimes against children. And so John, talk to us, give us a little bit of your background, kind of how you got here, and we'll and then we'd love to hear kind of where your perspective on kind of the narratives that are out there around human trafficking and what people sometimes believe it to be, like the movie Taken, and what you actually have seen in your time.
So I started in the state police in New Jersey, where I retired. I spent 25 years there. Corruption, organized crime, homicide, that's where I actually started. Well, it's New Jersey, right? So
you don't have crime in New Jersey.
Yeah, no.
None.
It just
The Jersey Shores
happenstance.
has nothing happening.
But the interesting thing, what you just mentioned about trafficking, even before I came the Internet Crimes Against Children commander, I did a lot of organized crime cases. So I did non-traditional, traditional organized crime cases. So back then, even you're talking in the late 90s into the early 2000s, we did trafficking investigations before trafficking even became a term of trafficking, where there was a movement. So a lot of the same things, from illicit massage parlors to people from different countries, from like looking at like Russia and China, we were looking at overseas. A lot of that has stayed the same today.
Okay. Now, you mentioned some of the massage parlors, and I know that some of the largest crime syndicates that centralize for massage parlors are based out of New Jersey, New York, kind of Flushing area. Are those ones that you guys ever looked into and investigated? Or
Yeah, and you have basically the Russian organized crime was out of Brighton Beach, New York. I mean, that's where their headquarters were. You had traditional organized crime, which you had the 5 families that were in New York. And then you had a whole host of different organizations everywhere from the cartels. Even back then, you had Cali Cartel, you had the Cali Cartel, and Jesus, I'm forgetting the main one, Pablo Escobar's cartel, right? So all that started back then, but the really move that I see is like all of a sudden you got attention, like the movie Taken, right? And like everyone believes that there's this like big online market. But the reality is that even though organizations will profit off of today, especially even children and child trafficking, child exploitation, the reality is that it's not one group all working in concert together.
Right.
Because like, do you go to your neighbor and just say, hey, are you a trafficker? Are you exploiting children? Because maybe we can get together and form a group.
I mean.
Right. So when you were investigating it, what were some of the different types of trafficking that you were seeing? Were you primarily investigating sex trafficking? Were you looking at labor trafficking? What were you looking into?
Back then, it was all sex trafficking, specifically the ability to profit off of the victims that they were doing. So that we were looking at it from an enterprise aspect of it, at the time.
And were their victims primarily U.S. citizens? Were they coming from overseas? What was the makeup of that population?
More overseas.
More overseas at that point.
More overseas at that point.
Do you feel like you're seeing now more domestic or have focused more domestically?
I think you have more domestic, but I think what you have today, and I can go to, we talk about Tor and the darknet and online stuff.
Yeah.
But everything has an online component, right?
Sure.
If we go back from Backpage to where we are right now, the ads that people do in order to really attract people, it's still there, but it's not as prevalent as the online aspect and the ability to do it. You add artificial intelligence, you add AI, the ability to sextort people. We've gone from and especially from the child exploitation aspect, we've now moved to where it's not just sexual gratification, it is financial gratification. And that's where the criminal groups like 764 are using that more or less to actually profit off of that, because now it's become profitable and the ability to extort victims becomes paramount in their organizations as a way to get money.
Right. So what you're really highlighting is how dynamic this crime is. And it's one that, oftentimes we see that we're still very reactive to the issue of human trafficking because traffickers are using all of these systems in order to really manipulate it to their favor. What, from your lens, are some of those trends that you've seen, and even that you mentioned AI, but like you've seen now that you think are just going to continue to evolve and really help?
Well, here's a perfect example, right? And we can get into whatever legislation, in a bit. But, banks, for example, you can go to Venmo, Cash App, right? They know when there's a foreign IP address, right? So they know when they can definitely look at money. Like I just wrote a check and all of a sudden I got a notice that, hey, did you write this check, right? So the technology is there for them to take a look at. So if I am now being, all of a sudden it's a foreign IP address from a known location where there's trafficking or exploitation, right? And then all of a sudden you see financial transactions from there, that should flag something, right? So now there's that financial component. We don't, and you hit it right there, Brittany, is that we're not proactive, right? And most of my career was doing proactive cases. It's just finding the person and going out there doing it. And it's hard because you don't have necessarily a baseline, right? So that is what we have to do, is we have to be more proactive. The problem is on the legislative front is that I could tell you what was going to happen 2 years from now, 2 years ago, and we're here. And no one will move until the building has burnt, rather than you.
Right. Well, it's like whenever we get those cases where it's like, I suspect that human trafficking is happening. Well, until the trafficking actually happens, you don't have a case. And it's really a challenging spot when it's still in those grooming phases or different pieces. Unfortunately, we're still in a position on a lot of policy that we have to wait for the crime to transpire before we can even do anything.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing too, is like organizations, right? Like there are criminal organizations that profit off of trafficking, but there are a lot of people that actually do it independently of anyone else, right? So, and I think that's where the movie Taken is. Oh, can't you just go take down the organization and we can, eradicate it? It's just not that simple, right? So, and I think there are ways to combat not just trafficking, but exploitation. But we don't take those approaches. And part of it is because there's a profit aspect on the tech aspect, right? So the way we look at tech and we look at, for example, information that comes in. So let's use a child exploitation example. Most of your child exploitation cases, like if I am Apple, I'm Google, or Snap, or any of these companies, everyone sends different information. So if you just look at the cyber tip line, last year they had 29.2 million tips, right? Funny part is only like 250 came from Apple, even though Apple has a 60% market share.
I mean, obviously they're not happening on Apple platforms.
But the problem is that like each entity gives different information, right? So law enforcement has to react to 100 different companies because it's voluntary. There's no uniformed data. Like the companies, we have a lot of smart people in this country. I really do believe that. I think but you're telling me that no one can fix things from a technical standpoint.
Right.
So even look at, we were talking earlier, right, about your Instagram feed, right? Like, and then all of a sudden you'll look at one.
My algorithm seemed to be a little messed up. It had nothing to do with this work. I'm just sure of it.
No.
Her algorithm has a dark sense of humor, is what we figured out.
Maybe I have a dark sense of humor at this point in this process.
But the reality is it pushes that, right?
Right.
We don't know the each company, how they actually push their algorithm. But the reality is that you're going to absorb that content. So mostly, and I remember this is a couple years ago, but you look at my Instagram feed, if you want to know anything about anyone, just look at their Instagram feed, right? Like
it predicts
you're going to see travel to Italy, Spain, and Soprano videos because I clicked on a couple of them and now that's all
Dunn,
I get.
It's always in Yellowstone. It's always at the top of my feed with quotes.
But also, they push things to you. They push like children to you. They push, and again, that is where some of the challenges lie.
Right. Yeah, no, I was on the phone with a woman the other day who's done a lot on the data research of the algorithms and tech, and she was saying that they, 15, 20 years ago, the way that they started to identify the trafficking issue domestically is that they started actually with investigating how ivory was being sold on open source, like on Facebook, on Instagram, and on these things. And all of a sudden, she said over time, as they went and pulled the thread on how do we find ivory, all of a sudden, everything that started to get fed to them because they realized that they found somebody who would engage in some level of illegal activity. And so then the algorithms continued to change. And then all of a sudden, it was buying and selling children on the black market that was starting to be exposed.
Yeah. So, and I'll give you a stat. In the last 90 days, there's 160,000 IP addresses, 162-ish, that are trading known child sexual abuse material. These are known videos of children being abused. And only 893 are being worked in the United States right now. Right. So when you look at something along those lines, we just don't have the capacity even to do that because we're handling, cyber tips. So one of the things is that 3 to 5%, according to a lot of the ICAC task forces, that's what results in arrest from those tips. And it's not the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children's fault. It's the tech companies that give them that information, right? So, one of the things that I'll do is I do try to collaborate with the tech industry as well as, I got to meet with the Snap CEO. They're unaware of the lack of resources for law enforcement that we have, right? So everyone is in their own silos. Like even if you look at trafficking and child exploitation, right? Your trafficking's here, child exploitation here, tech's here. And when they get together, they talk, hey, yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Good, but no action comes of it.
But no action. And you hit it right there, right? Like we talk about the same thing over and over again with the same result, which is insanity.
Correct. Right. I mean, and that's been the challenge with so many convenings is that's all they are. People convene, they talk about it, they walk away, and there's now mobilization. And I think that's one of the things that we have to overcome is how do we create systemized process in order for data collection to happen in a way that defines how that information needs to come over from these tech firms and how can we move toward greater consistency, because without it, it's really hard to do pattern detection and everything else. And the prosecutions are a drop in the bucket compared to the problem, which just keeps us in a perpetual cycle.
Yeah. And besides, that's where everyone is. Everyone's on, depending on what screen time, that people have. I don't know what the last statistics from Pew Research was just on screen time, but the reality is that's where everyone is, right? So, it's easier for me to exploit someone to where everyone is. So interesting enough is that, like, if you think about it, right, like, and you're online. So our brain center, our fear, so I'm a neuroscience junkie in addition to all my other things, right? So your amygdala is your fear center, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. So what happens is that, like, if you're going down a dark alley and you see something and you see, for example, something that can happen, your amygdala is like, oh, crap. Right. Like there's something bad can happen, right? You're on edge. You're already looking. But it's not activated when you're sitting in the bedroom of your home, right? You're in a safe spot. Right. So automatically you become more trusting. Right. So you think about it like all of a sudden if this building started to shake in an earthquake, we take action, right? but you're not going to do that, and that doesn't propel you. So that gives that ability. The other thing offenders do, traffickers, child exploitation, what they do is they match language.
Right.
What do we like to talk about most?
Ourselves.
Right. So I only know one Taylor Swift song, but let's say you like Taylor Swift, right?
Sure.
And
wait, which Taylor Swift song do you know?
1989, only because that's when I graduated high school.
I prefer Thomas Rhett.
So, but here's the funny part of that, right? Like if you and I are talking and I'm like, and you say, hey, you went to Taylor Swift? Oh, I went to Taylor Swift too. What concert did you go to? Oh, I went to that same concert, right?
Yeah.
Everyone thinks the grooming and manipulation is the actual gift. It's the language prior to that. That's the hook, right? It's like seeing someone that has the same words and they articulate the same way. Like people that match and mirror,
right?
Those are one of the things, and those are interviewing techniques. But offenders and traffickers, what they'll do is they'll mimic the person's language and repeat it back to them. And then now I'm in a situation, for example, where I'm in a non-threatening spot. I don't see the danger.
Right. Well, and I think that the mirroring of language in any tool that's used by traffickers, you look at it and you're like, it's a tool. So we can either use those for good or evil, because a lot of that mirroring, I mean, that's how we build rapport with survivors.
Yep.
It's how we want to help break down any of the barriers. It's how we break down the trauma bond and rebuild the trust bond. It comes down to mirroring language. So we know the tools. It's just everybody's deciding whether they're going to weaponize it or they're going to empower somebody with it.
So I could tell you that we've used that tool to catch offenders. I mean, on the dark net who were anonymous, that were using VPNs, who came and tried to buy like a 9-year-old or an 11-year-old, right? Like there's some cases there. So there's a community on the darknet called the Pedo Support Community, right? Where they actually talk about how to traffic and how to exploit children, right? What to do, how to groom. Like that's where the community gets together more or less, because they're in the shadows and they can talk best practices.
Well, and that's been the challenge with the growth of the internet and just the access now is that, to your point earlier, like you wouldn't come next door and say, hey, do you want to go traffic a bunch of kids? But through the internet, these individuals who are perpetrating that crime in communities around the world now have a place where they can go, and it's an echo chamber of their thoughts. It's an experience that they can build upon, and it networks together all of those like-minded individuals who have really nefarious intent.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's part of the, that's part of the challenge, right? Now, the AI, I don't need to now go and do it 1,000 times. I can create a bot to do it for me, right? And if you look at them, I don't know if you've looked lately, but, just playing around, there's probably 100 different like AI, chatbot, girlfriend, boyfriend, et cetera things, right? And they're a lot more intuitive now than they were 6 months ago, right? Like, so from those updates. And all they're doing is they're asking questions, and then they give you answers. And then basically they're taking that data, and then you take that data and you're able to do that. So you have that, and you have AI open image generators.
Right.
So now I can create the video, for example, of someone. Let's say I'm trying to do an ad, like I'm a modeling agency. Look at some of our models. We think this can be you. Very easy to create. I can go on Flux.ai and just create a whole bunch of different videos, put it together, and then show someone, right? So you cannot tell the difference, right? So those are the things that I'm going to use. Like, so as technology advances, I see what an offender can use, and then I try to legislate it beforehand.
Right. So we had talked before about how you're really looking a couple of years, or sometimes in cases 5 years down the road, seeing what's coming and trying to anticipate what that needs to be from the legislative process. So where are we right now when it comes to legislation to be able to respond to the explosive growth of ICAC? And where do we need to go? What are the laws that we need to be seeing in place? Because sometimes lawmakers will come up with a really half thought out solution, and and age verification. And it's not seeing the whole problem. So explain kind of where we're at with the whole problem and where we need to go legislatively.
So first of all, legislation's horrible, all right?
Yes.
Our political system's horrible.
Right.
I mean, it's just, and it's not a Democrat-Republican thing. It's a process thing.
Right.
And
we can't keep up.
And we can't keep up, right?
Well, we're still fighting Section 230, which is the 90s legislation that is
and
causing
the
problems.
challenge is, and there's two components. One, if a bad bill gets in, and that's having the foresight to realize what can happen here. Now, had people actually looked to the future with 230 and saw where things were going, 230 might not have happened, right? So the other thing is you have to realize is that I go lobby and I talk to political senators and congressmen about legislation, but in one room you have me with bubblegum and duct tape, and then you have $1 trillion Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and in the next room lobbying. Right. So by the talking points of what a legislator tells me, I can tell you who actually came up with those talking points, right? So it's just creating a narrative. All you're doing is pushing and delaying. Legislation, you only need one person to really kill a bill. So let's look at the Kids Online Safety Act.
Right.
All right. Passes the Senate 91-3. We get into the House. If it got to the floor, overwhelmingly would pass.
Can it get out committee?
Can't get it to the floor.
But you can't get it to the floor because you have Johnson and Scalise there, right? So again, if it gets to the floor, it passes, right? So then you try to move bills in different vehicles, like you have the national, the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, right? So there are so many bill fixes. So I could tell you some of the, like here, I'll give you a perfect example. So right now, if I serve a subpoena, for example, administrative subpoena, and I'm looking for information, just let's say it's Discord or one of the companies, and I serve it to them, and I do not have a do not disclose order, Discord is actually telling the user, hey, law enforcement just subpoenaed that.
Right.
Law enforcement hits the door, everything is wiped.
Everything. Well, and I'm seeing that challenge. So my family's been being swatted for the past 12 weeks by traffickers through the night. And one of the things that was interesting to me is that I didn't realize that they could FOIA the body cams that law enforcement was wearing even after they had entered the premise of our home as law enforcement. And so that just opened up an entire avenue for them to be able to your point, get really vital information if you don't recognize it and ask law enforcement to remove the camera for that type of investigation.
Yeah. So, when my mother was just deceased in the home, they came in and I had to ask them to shut off the body cams, right? They don't think about it either, but they also have policies that they're like, don't shut your body camera off, right?
Right.
So
it's such a hard balance. And that's what I was thinking. Though. I was like, it's not that they were wrong. It's just that you don't recognize it. And those are the vehicles that are allowing for loopholes to happen where bad actors can leverage, open source information.
So, and there's a ton of loopholes. So, and for whatever reason, some people object it. So the Protect Our Children Act right now, which basically authorizes the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. So think about it this way, is that they only are appropriated $31.9 million. That's $522,000 per task force to investigate it. So when I started in 2015, we had 2,000 cyber tips. By the time I retired in 21, we had about 8,000. Last year, they had 25,000. They have 522,000 for the entire state of New Jersey. Right?
The numbers never work. I mean, it's a $5.9 billion industry is believed in the United States, and we throw roughly $120 million at it collectively every year. You can't fight it on the pennies on the dollar.
So for 3 years, I've been fighting to increase that funding. It's not going to work. No. It just won't. So, there's other alternatives, around there that we have to find solutions to. But here's a perfect example. So Cory Booker objected to the Protect Our Children Act. And when he did that, there was like 6 bills that they wanted to go through a uniform consent through the Senate just to get past the Senate. And he blocked them, and Protect was one of those. The challenge is that because he was worried that funding isn't going to certain cities, sanctuary cities, immigration, et cetera. Except this bill had nothing to do with that, right? And that's where sometimes the actual member doesn't know and the staffers don't know because they think that this bill or this grant program is the same as this and is the same as that, right? So we do so much education. I want to say in the last 2 years, I've probably met with 200 officers between the House and Senate. But what will you do in those cases? So in that case, I did an op-ed. I did an op-ed on Senator Booker. The next day, 7 people from their staff talked to me. And, Senator Booker himself actually popped in. He goes, hey, I'm not going to stop that, but this does this, right? It doesn't do this. So part of it is the education. Part of it is bringing attention. So kind of that's what you have to do. There's roadblocks on both sides.
Of course. And
the roadblocks aren't even intentional. Look, I do believe that if I can sit down with anyone, that they will see common sense. Now, I know that's not true, but I keep that belief here because
it keeps you going. You have to believe that there is hope in this issue. Otherwise, it's a really hard day.
Yeah. So, but and that's just one bill. So that bill, last year we tried to pass in lame duck, still unauthorized. We couldn't get that passed. And then we're still continuing to fight. That's just one bill. Yeah. We're involved in, we got this bill in force that for AI, right now, if you get charged with obscenity, you are not on a sex offender registry. So it aligns the charges to make them similar, both from an AI perspective. Because again, if I am making AI images of 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and then it's only going to lead to the actual victim, right? And then secondly, we have a bill where law enforcement right now, they have to, in order to process evidence, for example, they actually have to put it on a thumb drive, then drive it 3 hours someplace, then process it. We can't process it in the cloud. We can't identify victims in the cloud, right? So because of the nature of it, so we have a bill to do that. So we have a bill now device-based, and we're not going to call it age verification specifically, but think about this, right? You have your 2 kids, right? You have your phone, right? Wouldn't it be easier just to have 3 buttons that you can just press, and then your children couldn't send images, couldn't talk to anyone over 18, and then not send financial information? So device-based parental controls, right? So let's call this empowerment. And then we realize is that, well, what about vulnerable adults, right? Like your mother and father, now all of a sudden they're getting scammed. Right. So those are the bills that we're trying to do. But again, the app companies will be great for that, but maybe not Apple and Google now. But Apple has their own system, but they don't talk to the other apps. Right. So that's easier than trying to regulate 2 million apps. So part of legislation is finding the easier solution and the easier path. Right. And that is really what it comes down to. When I started this, I was like, I'm going to change the world here. After 1 week, I was like, okay, this is where my bar is, right?
But you do the things that you can.
Yeah.
But I do think that as we continue to see the laws evolve and getting stronger, especially when it comes to some of the AI-generated content, and we can start to see these prosecutions, then it gives law enforcement more courage to be able to take on some of these cases that are really odd. We had a case in Charlotte that it was a woman reached out to the FBI and said, hey, my husband, his computer has these images and I think it's pornography, but they were glitchy. And she kept trying to explain it and kept explaining that they were glitchy. And they looked into things further and went to his home and met him at his work and took tons of devices, found almost tens of thousands of images of pornography, but again, they were glitchy. And what they actually figured out was that he had taken a picture of his old high school girlfriend. This gentleman was into his 50s, and he was also a doctor in Charlotte. But he had taken a picture of a high school girlfriend, and there were 2 other girls next to her. And it was the first day of school from high school years ago. And he had taken those faces and had generated the content based upon the faces of those individuals. So these women who had never met him had law enforcement showing up at their door saying, you're actually the victim in a child pornography case. And they couldn't understand how that could even be possible because they'd never experienced it. They'd never gone through anything. They didn't know who this person was. And thankfully, they were able to get a prosecution done. But it was a case that involved child pornography, AI generated through people who didn't know the individual. It just was such a complicated case. But that opens up the door for other law enforcement agencies to hear those things and go, okay, it is possible, because sometimes we find that human trafficking is a complex issue and CSAM is a complex issue. And so if you don't, sometimes having that precedent is the thing that they need to see that, if they do the work, that it's going to get prosecuted.
Well, and that's you hit on a thought there, is that a lot of people, the fear of the unknown. Well, I never saw that before, right? Seeing the unknown and pushing for the next thing, like Texas passed the age verification law, right? So everyone was basically triumphant, high fives. All right, we're going to get Pornhub out of here. We're going to protect our citizens. All they did is push people to VPNs.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and I think that's when there's a lack of understanding, because they recognize one part of the problem, but they haven't brought that interdisciplinary thought leadership to the table to really dissect it from multiple layers to say, okay, if we go to step A, what is the downward effect to Z?
So
and people stop short.
Now, what I would have did was and we're working on VPN legislation too, is because we have no insight to VPNs. We don't know exactly how much data they're retaining. How do we get some of that data? So if everyone goes to VPNs, right, because of the age verification law, well, now we're not going to have people are going to be a lot more private. It's the same concept as encryption, right? So if all of a sudden Meta starts moving everything to encrypted, they're going to have less tips because they can't see the information in this space and don't have access to it. So the way of looking at it is okay, here's part A, but then we need to do part B, C, and D in conjunction with part A.
Right. I think it's about laying tracks in parallel.
Yeah.
And I think it's approached so singularly in nature right now that is our challenge. And so to your point, it's about getting in there and educating policymakers. But you're one person, we're another two.
Yeah.
And all I hear from this is that there has to be a rally call for community members for that community activation. We have to get them calling their representatives and helping mobilize it, because you can't go up against the tech giants. We have to find grassroots movements that help mobilize.
So what do you think politicians care about most?
Their constituents and getting reelected.
Not constituent, reelected,
well,
right?
Yes, I know. Appealing to their constituents to get reelected, but it's all about reelection.
Yeah,
but so if that's the things that matter, they need to hear from the people.
Do I believe there are people that really do care? But I've also talked to Congress people and Senate that don't even know the laws within their own, how to get law.
There's a lot of ignorance.
So I find myself educating more staffers on process on what to do. In some cases, because what happens is that in the House is you'll have a relationship, you'll build someone, right? They understand it. And then 6 months later,
that staffer's gone.
And there's a new staffer there who.
And you have to start back at ground zero.
He's 22 years old.
Yeah. So, and that's the funny part. The biggest thing I did when the Hill was oh my God, our country's being run by 25-year-olds.
They are. And I feel really old every time I go there. I'm but it is. It comes down. And the other part I kind of wanted to go back to as well is I think it's important for people to understand that so often it's this very minor thing that's going to block a bill from getting through, but it's the ultimate thing to that member. And so we were working on the Trafficking Victim Protection Act back in, I guess, what was that, 2022? And it hadn't been reauthorized, and that holds up over $1.7 billion in funding over the 5 years and all of these challenges. But it was all came down to wanting to codify an office that nobody even wanted, and it had nothing to do with the trafficking victim side of it. And so that's why it's so challenging.
The member was basically holding it hostage and wouldn't send it to the floor for a vote until one of the other committees had agreed to let something go so he could codify it into law. And it was a standoff. And
it's the give and take.
Right.
And then if you in the same party, this Republicans pissed at this Republican. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to do anything for him for the next 6 months.
Right.
So,
well, what this one ended up with was it's the power of that community member.
One of my favorite stories.
Right. So he was home,
on recess.
On recess, and some little lady tracked him down in the grocery store and just laid into him, and he was like, "Oh my gosh!"
About how he doesn't support trafficking victims,
right? But it came down to her advocacy in a very public way that made him feel like, oh, wow, it's actually getting down to this level.
So it's funny that you mentioned that. I've done probably 4 op-eds, and every op-ed hits home, and like unfavorably, because people don't see it. What they pay attention to is what is in their name, how it impacts them, right? I think a couple of biggest lessons too, especially in this space, is you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Correct.
And that is the problem that we have. Everyone wants the perfect thing when we're willing to make incremental change. Sometimes you can't even see that incremental change, but it's there. But that builds, right? And you build it and build it and build it. So yeah, that's the biggest thing is, and people will just, no, I don't like it because it has this in it. But 90% of it does this. As long as it doesn't harm anyone, yeah, I would like it to be stricter here. I would like it to be more punitive here. I would like to have this here. But if we don't have anything, we aren't going to help fix the problem here.
Right.
So, and no one's pragmatic, and then, I think the other part is, and then this goes for the trafficking, this goes for all our space and our organizations, because I see that too, is the enemy is the ego, right?
Oh my gosh.
All right, just get off your high horse. Can we just fix something? This isn't about you. It's not about an organization.
Not about credit,
it's about a community to make the world a better place. I mean, that's why I'm here. I mean, and you sit here and you look at it from a broader view, and I can see it, right? Like you can see the different solutions, but it's hard. Like the amount of time that goes into a bill, the amount of education. And then you might have organizations that are very well intended and that really do care, but they really weren't in the space. And all of a sudden they give inaccurate information. And this is what tech is really good at, right? We come in, let's say we have 5 organizations and we go and we talk. We're going to have 5 different talking points, but we want the same thing. Tech comes in with the same talking point, right? So there's no confusion. When you have 5 people saying 5 slightly different things, it makes it harder. So that's why what we started doing is actually writing bill text and then give it to them. Rather than, here's an idea, this is what you need to do, it won't get done. Yeah. So write the bill text, give them the bill text. So that's why we have 2 of the bills that I mentioned, we're going to get introduced in the next month. Yeah. So, and we found, to me, it's just how much more work can we do for them and take off their plate and then make it easier for them to actually give them an avenue.
Well, and it is the thing that allows you to see the whole problem, bring them the whole problem, and then bring them the whole solution. And all of that is working together versus getting something that is, maybe thought out on one part of the issue, but not fully thought out on the other part. And they almost nullify each other if, you don't address it the right way.
Yeah. And I think what I bring is so I just didn't do child exploitation. I did homicide, organized crime, right? So I had so many different investigative, my whole entire career.
Right.
I know where the shortcuts are, right? So I know it would make an investigator's life easier and make it more efficient to actually do things, right? So I stay in that lane. I don't go into the victim services aspect because I don't know anything about that, right? So, and I think that's part of it too, is people staying in their lanes, in their expertise. That's where we come together. Like in the ICAC world, there was the multidisciplinary team. We had a prosecutor, we had an advocacy center, right? Even though I'm a skilled interviewer, I'm not going to go do a forensic interview of a 6-year-old. I'm going to have the advocacy center do that because I want to make sure that that child is not re-traumatized. I want to make sure it's taken care of, not re-victimized. So, those are the things from a victim-centric aspect as well.
Well, it goes to the idea that it's collective impact. Yeah. We cannot solve this issue as one organization, one individual, or one policymaker. We really have to take our extreme ownership over the piece that we each do well, but then come together to the table to share the the wins, the failures, learn together, and just continue to fail fast and fail forward. But we have to keep progressing. And I think that's, to your point, the ego gets in the way of that. And so how do we get people to lay down their egos and their logos and really come together has to be because we all see this as a united vision and really believe that we are better together. And I think that's the opportunity on the table to see.
Can you imagine if everyone got together at the same time and actually moved?
Rowed in the same direction?
Yeah.
Yep. It'd
Boys in the boat.
Yep.
But the ego isn't just keeping us from collaboration.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of that in this field where somebody wants to take credit or somebody wants to put their name to something. But it's actually preventing us from advancing.
Yeah.
When we create something and we hang our hat on it, and my mom always said every crow's baby is blackest and best. Like, it's when we think that our thing is the only thing, then we hang on to it and we're not willing to innovate. And we have seen systems across this country atrophy because there was ego in it and not advancement. And the new ideas were rejected because it was different than what they were currently doing, and they didn't want to be unseated instead of making it about advancing the process.
So I'll give you a couple examples with that, right? Like, let's look at a lawmaker. And John Cornyn, 100% has been awesome in this field, but everyone's like, no, you got to go to John Cornyn. Wouldn't it be prudent for us to develop more champions and more lawmakers rather than go to the same person over and over again? Even Jeffrey and Drew has a couple of our bills in the House, Ann Wagner, Klobuchar, who's been tremendous. Durbin has been pushing, right? So the idea is to develop more and more champions, right? Because the more champions you have, the more collectively it's going to do. I did a visit with the Oklahoma ICAC, and Congresswoman Stephanie Bice came, and she's like, what do you need from me, right? Like, because when you see it, it makes it personal, right? And you have children, and it relates to you. That's what you have to really try to do. And, to your point, about innovation, I've people in the field have been a lot longer doing this than me. They're like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've been doing this for 20 years and this is the way it needs to be done. And I'm like, well, and this is the Jersey bluntness. I'm like, well, nothing's changed in 20 years. It's gotten 100 times worse. Don't you think it's time to do something different?
Right. If nothing changes, nothing changes. And we have to continue to advance.
And I'm just one of those, I'm not a very patient person, I guess.
Welcome. You're in good company.
You GSD. We're fine with this. We would rather.
Yeah. Because I mean, if we're talking about the same thing over and over again, like this is what I was alluding to earlier, I mean, then let's change it, right? Like the one thing I think, even from a personal development, the great thing about like if we make not the best decision, tomorrow we can make a better decision, right? We can change our course anytime. So that's where we look at something. I'm looking at something. Well, it's not going to work this way. I'm going to do that, right? So, and that's what I try to do, and I try to pivot a lot. And because like, okay, this is blocked here. That means it's not done and go home. Okay. Like, for example, protect. Like, I would like to get it through the NDAA in the Senate. If that doesn't work, then Senator Booker drops his objection, and then we can live see it. If that doesn't work, then I'm going, because it's already passed committee, then I'm going and bothering Senator Thune to get it on the floor, right? Like, that's what I mean being strategic in our thought process of trying to come up with a problem.
Yeah. Well, we have seen this recently where the National Human Trafficking Hotline operators had been highly criticized by 41 different attorneys general who had said, hey, listen, we're not getting tips. They're not getting passed to us. We don't know what's going on. We don't have visibility into it. We're asking questions. Nobody's answering. So they came out, 36 of them came out in 2023, said we have a problem, didn't get a response. 41 of them came out in 2025 and said we still have a problem. And so the government decided it was already up time for renewal of the grant, and they went to switch. Well, what'd they do? They gave it to another organization that is under federal investigation for not answering phone lines. They have kids that have gone missing. They had 77,000 calls that went unanswered, according to the statements from Senator Grassley's office. And they have repeated the same problem. And so we've seen these things taking place and going, we've got to come up with a different solution, because a phone number now is a bit of an antiquated solution for where we are these days and age, where technology is king. And so we created a technology solution that allowed people to use an app, report suspicions of trafficking, or chatbot, or there's a phone number that engages with the chatbot, report suspicions of trafficking, have it analyzed against a behavioral matrix to rank the likelihood of trafficking, and route the tips directly to law enforcement. Innovation comes out of when you get proximate to the problem and understand the problem. And when we had decision makers that I think were a little too far removed, in my opinion, from the problem, and they handed it to somebody who was continuing to, again, have open investigations by the Office of the Attorney or the Inspector General to be the solution, then we as a field cannot rely on the government to be the answer. No, we have to step in and do something different.
And then to your point is there's not enough resources for law enforcement to even do a fraction of the information that comes in.
Absolutely.
Right? They're not set up for that. So I think that's part of it too.
Right. Well, what, as we kind of, I know, come to the close, we've had you talking for a long time. We appreciate you. But what are the things that you would want any community member listening to this to know? What are the things that you think are important?
Biggest thing is that you have the power to change it. Mm-hmm. That's number one, right? Number two is that if your child all of a sudden is being victimized, please do not victim blame. Please do not blame them or have an open conversation, because I see that a lot. But everyone has the ability to, one, protect their own home, just educate themselves. B, get off your own devices, quite honestly, because I think people don't pay attention to that. But I think the solution rests with each individual, right? The more someone is aware, the more someone helps with this issue, the more likely we are to solve it. And that even includes talking to lawmakers, your children, your community, et cetera.
Yeah. And what would you say to them when it comes to being aware of maybe any legislation and reaching out to lawmakers? Is that something that you think is valuable for them to do?
100% valuable. I mean, first of all, everyone should know who their representative is, their local or their congressperson and their Senate. Reach out to their office and say, hey, I'm tired of my community and children being victimized. I want something done about it. I think that is important.
It is. It's absolutely important. And, I think we've lost in this country the wisdom and the knowledge to understand how impactful our voices are when it comes to representatives and senators, and, what we can do to really hone in the focus, because somebody is telling them where to prioritize their time and where to prioritize their legislation. And so when we as community members make those things apparent to them that we care, then they can put their time and their focus there, because they do want to get reelected. And I do believe there are some that do want to make a difference.
Yeah. And there are champions, and I do believe that. Look, it's such a complex, it's not such a complex problem, but the solution's complex.
Right.
So it's multifaceted, and it takes a lot of people and a lot of commitment. And I think that's where we need to make a change.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining the Team Protectors podcast. You have an opportunity to call your congressional member to help not just protect those who might be being victimized, but also start to prevent trafficking in your community. If you enjoyed today's episode, we encourage you to like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. And then download the Simply Report app to empower yourself to be able to report suspicions of human trafficking. We look forward to seeing you next time on Team Protectors.